Hi, everybody. Welcome to the AFMA webinar. Happy New Year. This will be our first webinar of the year. My name is Rebecca Webb. I am on the AFMA Board of Directors. I am the audio and uh, webinar co-chair with Melissa Keller. I will be giving your lecture for your presentation for the day. Just a little preset. All of these ideas are my own. I have nothing to disclose. And this isn't necessarily the only way to have a critical conversation. It is just something I wanted to share with you guys in case you needed some help having critical conversations with residents or other people. So that being said, I'm also from U Chicago Advent Health in LaGrange, Illinois. We're a 777 program. We are community based. And I have been here at Advent Health doing this job for about 12 years. Here are the objectives that I'd like to meet for today. Identify when a conversation is needed, strategize the right conversation to be had and with whom, utilize conversation skills to get to the bottom of issues. And again, I have no disclosures. Right. I have a set of guidelines that I use to make sure that I'm prepared for critical conversations as they arise. Number one, most importantly, know the rules you're holding your residents accountable for. This is the foundation on which we build the rest of the conversation. Do not show all your cards. Make sure you get the residents' perspective so that you can be sure you know what the conversation needs to prioritize. Um, be respectful and caring. Be consistent, don't play favorites, and then don't make exceptions for one unless you're going to make it for everyone. And if you're going to make that exception for everyone, just go ahead and change the rule. Those are kind of my set of things to prepare myself. Um, So one of the hardest parts of being an administrator is knowing when to have a talk with your program director, your coordinator, or a resident. Everyone's program runs a bit differently, and some administrators, coordinators, managers are not always encouraged or trusted to take charge of certain situations that may arise on a daily basis. So for my program, I'm kind of responsible for all the day-to-day operations. Um, of my program. This includes like any call-ins, scheduling conflicts, complaints that come in, professionalism issues, and of course, the list goes on and on of many more things. But as a new administrator or even a seasoned administrator for that matter, knowing how to prioritize the necessity for a conversation could be the difference between success and failure. Let's take a look at first steps regarding to have or not to have a conversation. So, the first thing that I do when, an incident would occur, I would say, I just take a pause. I stop yourself from immediate response. Um, I know it's hard sometimes because we want to, clap back immediately when somebody says something that just kind of rubs us the wrong way. But in order for us to be valid to the people that we're having conversation with, we need to stop ourselves from having an immediate response. So I always stop. I take a deep breath. That will help your brain to engage and stop any random thoughts that you're having. Um, Force yourself to think or formulate a strategy to lead you to the preferred outcome. And then respond in a calm and thoughtful manner. So like these are the 4 steps that I take every time before I try to react when something goes down. So if anybody has any comments at this point, I'm going to open, it up. If you have any questions, I'm going to go through some scenarios so that this will look a little bit different. You'll kind of be able to get a feel for how all this kind of works together for me. Does anybody have any questions or comments thus far? Awesome. All right, moving forward. All right, scenario 1. You get a call from a clinical coordinator in cardiology stating that your resident did not show up for their rotation. What happens next? So here's a scenario that may happen often or never for some of you. We're going to walk through the scenario, come up with a plan, and then, you can unmute or you can discuss in the chat box what you think your first reaction should be. And then we'll look at possible other steps once you do that. Anybody?
Unfortunately, this happens often. I think across the board. Here's some comments. Denise says, my initial thought would be to contact the resident to see if they are okay. Contact resident. That is a good answer.
Awesome answer.
I've had this happen to me both in a good way and in a bad way. So,
Agreed. Myself also. So here is kind of my thought process and how I kind of take myself through this situation. So first thing first, apologize for the confusion regarding the resident's schedule to the coordinator that you're on the phone with. We need to maintain trust with the rotation to ensure continued rotation support. So that's the first thing you're going to do. Be sure that the schedule given to the resident shows that they were indeed supposed to be at that rotation. And if this doesn't raise any red flags, like the schedule is, the schedule the resident was given is the same as the schedule that's in your scheduling system. You know that they were definitely supposed to be there. You've confirmed with the rotation that they were not there. So at that point, we're going to move forward from there. So now you've gained some intelligent confirmation information that you need to be able to have the appropriate conversation. So that was your stop. That was your bring it in. Let's figure out what we need to do next. So this actually requires an actual phone call, not a text message. You're going to need to call that resident because the first thing outside of apologizing to the rotation, making sure that you didn't schedule them to be someplace else is ensuring the safety of your resident. So absolutely 100% ensure your resident is safe. Usually this call will turn up the real reason that they missed their rotation. Okay. So that phone call is not only for you to show compassion and say, listen, I was very concerned about you. Your rotation called, you didn't, make it over there. Are you okay? Showing compassion first usually lowers the guard and tends to bring honesty to the conversation. So you definitely want to make sure, even though you're like, this is like the 4th time this resident has done this. I don't know what the heck's going on with this guy. They can't get it together, whatever it is. Make sure that that first contact with that resident is compassion first. It will lower the guard and sometimes they will tell on themselves. Explain that your first priority is to ensure their safety, which is why being where they need to be is so important. So explain that it's important for us to be present at rotations for further education, but also to maintain future education for the residency going forward. You're going to give them their expectations for the future. Make sure that they know that the expectation is that they're at their rotation. And if they cannot make it, that they not only need to contact you or whoever it is that your program designates needs to be contacted, but also the rotation coming from a resident that is supposed to be at a rotation, the that's them taking personal responsibility for that. So the rotation is going to be a lot less apt to think, what the heck is going on there at LaGrange residency? Like those residents can't get it together. If the resident reaches out to them directly and says, I have a conflict, I had a flat tire, my OB went into labor, I'm not going to make it in for my rotation, something like that, like you are going to have a better outcome in the future. And they're not going to question every time we have a resident come to rotate there. And then number 5 on my list of things to do after having this conversation with the resident is document the conversation. Document the date, the time, what time you got the phone call from the coordinator in cardiology or wherever it was. Make sure that you're documenting what time you contacted the resident, that they were safe. No opinions in your documentation. No opinions in your documentation. I'm going to say it one more time. No opinions in your documentation, because if for some reason this becomes a habit, you are going to need to use this documentation to be able to be consistent and put in a write-up for your resident for their permanent file. So always document your conversations, no matter how big or small they are, because it may start to form some kind of a pattern which you may need in the future. There's nothing worse than needing to let a resident go and not being able to let them go because you don't have documentation. And then last step is inform their advisor and the program director that this took place, this conversation happened. You can share your documentation, but always make sure that that documentation is in their professional file for that time when you sit down to do evaluations and they're like, oh yeah, Tom Miller's doing great. And you're like, except for Tom Miller can't get to his rotations and he didn't contact me. Um, so that's my kind of wrap up of this scenario. Does anybody have anything else they want to share about this scenario? Would you have done something different? Did I miss something?
No, I think those are great expectations. One thing that I would add is that it's important that you keep that open relationship with those rotations. I know that sometimes they don't notify the program that a resident hasn't shown up or hasn't been present. And I've had scenarios where I've gotten an email saying, oh, and by the way, the resident didn't show up this amount of time and we can't evaluate the resident. And we're like, wait, what do you mean they didn't show up? And so then we're reaching out to the resident going, where were you? What was going on? Was there a problem? Is everything okay? And then we find out that everything isn't okay. And so it's good to keep that open line of communication and make sure that those rotations are contacting you if your residents don't show up, because as we all know, our residents sometimes don't think about calling us. They just don't show up and then they tell them, oh, I had such and such going on, or, you know.
100% agreed. All right, on to the next scenario. All right, scenario number 2. A second-year resident calls in sick at 7:35 a.m. Resident was scheduled AM 9 a.m. and PM 1 p.m. office hours. You look at the schedule and only have an option of a first-year resident or a third-year resident. You send a group message with the 2 residents to ask for assistance. You are told that the first year has a doctor's appointment of their own at 1 p.m. and the third year has an appointment to have their brakes fixed at 2 p.m. Both things are a surprise to you as permission was not given in advance for either resident. How do you handle this scenario?
I tell which one is going to show up for the rotation because they didn't have their time approved ahead of time, whether they like it or not.
Anybody else have anything they want to add? All right, let me take you through. This is actually a scenario that happened last week for me. So I felt like I needed to share. This is me venting. Okay. So So I separated the conversation from the group chat so that I could discuss privately with each resident because I did not want to throw either one under the bus with the other one. And conversations that are being had with a specific resident for lapse in protocol should be private. So I did separate the conversation from the group chat so that I could discuss privately with each resident. I asked who their time off was cleared with. And of course, it was no one because I'm the one that gives permission. And I did not have that in my notes, my schedule anywhere. Ask why the appointments were not made during personal hours or why prior approval was not requested. Reference the rules, right? Bring it back. These are the rules. Know your rules. Reference the rules. Personal appointments should not be made during work hours unless previously approved. That is what our rules say. Um, so explain that a teammate of theirs is ill and we have a duty to the patients to make sure that the care is a priority and that coverage is needed. This in no way lessens the importance of their needs. There's your compassion. But because the rules were not followed, you will still need to make a plan. So document the conversation, um, make sure the information is sent to their advisors and the PD. So the end result of this debacle was that one resident covered the morning and the other one covered the afternoon. And I allowed them to reschedule the 1 to 2 o'clock patients so that she could get back from her doctor's appointment to be able to see the rest of the clinic because she was unable to reschedule for earlier that morning when she wouldn't have been covering clinic because the other resident was. That being said, they were both written up and are pending review from the program director who was out of town last week. So, this has been an ongoing issue in our program. I don't know if you guys are having that same problem. I feel like if they don't have something glaring at them from their schedule, like you don't have them going to their rotation or you don't have them in office hours, that for some reason this set of residents feels that if there's nothing on their schedule, that it's like free time and they're part-time employees for some reason. So I have it's like on a loop in my brain every time I talk to a resident that does something like this. Well, I couldn't get another appointment, so I just scheduled it for 4. Sorry, I can't help out. Well, it's not that you scheduled it. Like if you don't have anything in your schedule that's your admin time and you've chosen to like work on your charts from home at 8 p.m. instead of at 4 o'clock in the afternoon because you have this appointment, like I'm totally understanding of that. Like I'm not some lunatic that's going to be like, no, I have to chain you to your desk from 9 until 5. But I mean, like, let's all be adults, right? Let's tell me ahead of time that you have something that was a conflict in the schedule. You are aware that you're supposed to be at work from 9 until 5 p.m. because it's what you get paid for. But can you leave a little early and make up the time on your own? Like those are the conversations that I just continuously keep having. And I said, I'm fighting for you guys to get, raises and everything else because that's what we do. We advocate for them. And then they're working less and less and less, which is then causing us to work more and more and more. So having these conversations and making sure that these residents know that it is inappropriate. And like I said, don't make favorites. Don't make exceptions for anyone. Say the same thing to every single resident when they make when they have this issue, because all it needs to happen is that it gets out that another resident was treated differently than you, and now your ability to have conversations with your residents um diminishes. The respect that they have for you diminishes greatly, and these conversations are much harder to have when those things happen. Yes, faculty is included in that statement, 100%. Um, we have lots of critical conversations that are happening in our offices. A lot of times my program director wants to go super easy on our residents. Um, and it's not that we can't be compassionate, right? It's not that we can't offer to allow them to do these things that they need to do and live their lives no more than you wouldn't want your boss to tell you when you said, hey, I have a doctor's appointment, but the only time they have is open is 9 a.m. You wouldn't want your program director to tell you, well, I'm sorry, we need you to be in your office because you work from 9 to 5 and I'm not going to allow that, right? Like that would never happen. I mean, my program director would be like, absolutely, you manage your own time and you go. I mean, the difference is I can manage my time from my phone while sitting in the waiting room of the doctor's office. A resident can't see a patient in clinic from their house. So like they need to get it together and realize like if somebody's running behind in clinic, you're supposed to be here so that we can make sure that patient gets seen. Because we may need to call on you for assistance. If there's an emergency in clinic, we may need help. Or somebody falls down a set of stairs on the inpatient side and we need inpatient covered. Like there's nobody ever around, that's not going to work out. So, making sure that your policies are in place and you're sharing those rules regularly with your residents is a huge help when having these conversations also.
One thing, Becky, that my program has done, and we've done this now for probably 10 years because we were recognizing these same issues that you're just talking about, is we created what's called a Jeopardy list or a GOAT list, greatest of all time, that we joke about, oh, you're the greatest of all time resident, you get to be the lucky one. But we actually have it listed out on our new innovations homepage, and the residents know when they're signed to be on the Jeopardy list, and they know not to schedule appointments or to do personal things on their schedule. So they know if Dr. So and so calls in sick, or God forbid, they fall down the stairs and break their legs, or we had one slip in the road and break their foot, literally. Um, we pick up the phone and we just call that Jeopardy person and they know. Now, that being said, sometimes that doesn't work either because we have to call that person in and then somebody else is sick or something else happens. And
Sure,
so then it's okay, you're on an elective rotation. You're going to be the one that's pulled first before we pull somebody else. So
sure. Yeah.
there's always a what if, right?
Yeah, and it always depends on like how is your schedule actually formulated, right? And it also depends like if you have during holidays, I mean, it's completely a disaster. If one person calls in during holidays when you're already on like a truncated schedule and you've got other people out on vacation, you've got your person that's on call for OB, you got, three people on FMS or inpatient adult medicine, and then, like you have no one. You have nobody to choose from. You get to a point where you're like, I don't even know what to do. I don't even know who to call, right? And then, you're trying to call people that might be out of town or might be with family, and it's awful. Not to mention the fact that I just got called out of whatever I was doing, right? So, I mean, I think before I make like you get those calls, you're not expecting them. And I honestly, like my residents know, like I'm not gonna react right away. Like they usually text me, hey, is it okay for me to call you? And that's when I do my stop, breathe, get myself ready for whatever it is. And then I make sure I have my schedule pulled up in front of me because that's undoubtedly why they're getting in touch with me. And I just try and be as calm and as relaxed as possible because otherwise your brain just goes haywire and you just cannot get it together. I try to formulate plans ahead of time so that I don't have to, you start to like get resentful of them when they do it too many times, or you might like spout off, oh great, yeah, Lisa was sick yesterday. You know what I mean? Like those are the things that you have to be really careful that you're not doing. I know you're frustrated and I still do it sometimes, but you need to like try and get yourself under control so at least one of you looks like you're in control of something. All right, one more scenario and then we'll take some scenarios from the crowd. All right, here's scenario number 3. A resident's wife is expecting. Plans have been made in advance for the resident schedule to be somewhat cleared 1 week prior to the due date to minimize changes to the schedule. Labor comes 2 weeks early, 3 days prior to the end date for in-training exams, and the resident has not taken the exam yet. What do we do?
I know what I would do.
What would you do?
I would call the ABFM and tell them that that resident was not available to take the exam that year because this has happened to me before. So
So Anna is sitting behind me and she said that what she would do is call the resident to find out what's going on and see if he still had time to sit for the exam. So anybody else have any comments about what they would do other than cry? Because best laid plans, right? Um, so this happened to us this year also. Yeah, we got some weird stuff going on in our program, man. I gotta tell you. It was like, oh my God, how am I gonna come up with scenarios? And then I sat for a second. I was like, are you kidding me? We have a million, right? These are things we just think as normal stuff that happens during our day. But like sometimes you can't make this stuff up, right? So the thing with this resident was when he called me and he said, okay, my wife is in labor. I need to go. I'm gonna give you a call when we get to the hospital and give you an update as to what's going on because they just want her to come in and be checked. And I was like, okay, cool. Give me a call. Let me know what's going on. And he was like, okay. So it turns out that he sat at the hospital for 3 days with his wife and she still didn't deliver. So we're on like day one. It's all exciting. Holy cow, it's going to happen. We're going to start an induction. And then like they sat for 3 days at the hospital. So on day three, which was the final day for in training exams, I was fully prepared to do what Pamela said and call the ABFM and say, listen, I have a resident whose wife just went into labor. And yes, we should have scheduled him for the first day of ABFM ITEs, but he was on his rotation. And we were really just trying to get him enough hours in ER so we didn't have to make it up later. But can we, postpone? We didn't do that. So first things first, my wrap up on this is we do not need to have this conversation right now. Do not try to have a conversation with a father or a mother. Well, first of all, the mother that's in labor or a father that has a baby on the way. When they call you to say, my wife is in labor, don't try to formulate a plan right then because this resident is not listening. You can formulate a plan and you can get back to them later with the plan that has been formulated. So, this is one of those scenarios you do not have to have this conversation right now. Tell them, be careful, be focused when driving, don't get hurt, keep you updated, and that you'll reach out soon and wish them the best of luck and let them leave. So, you're going to take inventory of what needs to be done. So, make a plan. Like I said, wish the resident and his wife the best and wait for a window to discuss, asking to be kept in the loop. Once time permits, go ahead and circle back with that resident regarding changes to the schedule so that the in-training exam can either be taken or, of course, canceled. And then leave can be reconfigured for the fact that he left 2 weeks earlier than he was expected and all of that fun stuff. It turns out because she was sitting stalled in labor for 3 days, he ended up taking his in training exam virtually with me on watching him for the 4 hours from his wife's. No, he went home to the apartment and spent time with the cats while his wife was at the hospital. But he took his in training exam. So I kept my program director and his advisor and the chief residents in the loop because during that plan, there was other things that needed to be covered, which then I already had set up just in case something would have happened. But so yeah, so this is one of those scenarios where you can't let your anxiety for wanting to make sure everything is covered and like fix the problem immediately get in the way of what's best for the resident. Anybody have comments? Any- Okay, well,
I
anybody
just
have
want to say,
scenarios?
sorry, can you hear
Yeah.
me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry. So we had three of our residents have three babies like in 1 year, one academic year. So there's a lot of schedule changes and a lot of movement. I think we just need to be flexible and be able to, work with whatever. And of course, two of them came like a month early. So it's always it our schedule blew up that year. And I think we just had to be really flexible with them and be able to work with them and still be able to cover what we need to cover, make sure they met the requirements and get them done on time. So,
Read.
but we all have those years. Yeah, I think you just sit back, relax, like look at your schedule and just kind of take it one day at a time at that point.
There are some days when it's you seem like it's just impossible, right? Like how are we gonna get all of the things that need to be covered? And I think, burnout comes a lot quicker than it used to. People's threshold for extra anything, even if it's a swap, right, is just not what it used to be. I just don't feel like the want for the education um is there unless we really push it at them. So, I mean, it gets very difficult. People get very negative. They withdraw. They don't want to help when they need to. And it just makes our job and the conversations and the relationship we have with our residents much more important. Um,
We have a comment here, Becky, from Denise. It says, would it be wise whenever a resident is scheduled to have a baby to try and prepare schedule wise at least 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks prior to the due date, along with 3 to 4 weeks after? I think, yes, we can always prepare for that. But sometimes, as Becky just mentioned, things just change on the drop of a dime. And I have a perfect example. I had a resident who I did not know. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. I knew that his wife was having a baby. However, he did not disclose any of that information to me. And he came to me 4 days before his wife was due to have a baby and said, oh, by the way, I'm going to be out for the next 4 weeks. And I said, excuse me. And I had to do like Becky, and I had to stop and I had to breathe and I had to like take into consideration the entire scenario. And I spoke with my program director, and this resident was given 1 week to be off with his wife, and he was expected to come back to work because he did not plan ahead and he did not disclose any of that information to myself nor my program director or anyone else at the program. We just kind of heard through the grapevine. And even when you hear things through the grapevine, you just kind of have to wait until your resident or faculty come to you directly and have those conversations, because we all know where assumptions get us. And I have learned my lesson the hard way too. If I know something and I haven't heard it from that individual, I don't do anything with the information. I just let it sit. So,
so my response to this would be yes, it's always better to prepare than to not prepare at all. My 2 cents into that rule is do not let the time that you are preparing eat up time you could be doing something more important, because no matter what you do, you're going to have to make arrangements. So make your best laid plans, try and do the best you can to get stuff, moved out of the way or what have you. I mean, clearly, things like clinics can always be canceled or taken by somebody else. So, like, those are somewhat easy. You would just need to find somebody else to take it or reschedule those patients, which I don't like to do, but that is the easiest part of like clearing a schedule. Calls is a big deal. If someone, I will go 3 to 4 weeks either way before a baby is born and then after the end of the FMLA. I will go out another month because if they do a C-section instead of a regular delivery, they may be out longer. If they have complications, if something happens with the baby during birth or, close after, if they have issues with daycare, whatever it is, I make sure that those calls are cleared. But like I said, do not take so much time that you fall behind in other things you need to do, because this is going to happen whether plan exponentially for a half a month or not. And don't stress yourself out about it. Always reach out for help if you need somebody else to look at your schedule, because sometimes you get a little cross-eyed.
Lots of comments about this in particular, people planning ahead. There's one comment here that they have a parenting elective, which my program does as well.
So do we.
So I think a lot of programs have kind of incorporated that into their schedules. Then here's another difficult scenario. This is from Stanley. A resident completes a rotation at an external facility not connected to the program's institution. The relationship the outside institution has with your program is already rather tenuous and is put into further disarray as several preceptors of the site provide negative reviews of your resident, including one of them now stating they no longer wish to precept residents. How do you navigate the discussions needed to maintain the relationship and ensure future residents are good representatives of your program, and how to correct the resident who received negative evaluations? That's a big concern, I think, and I think it happens more often than we talk about. Becky, you're on. I'm going to let you answer this because unfortunately I've had to deal with this too.
All right. I'm gonna just kind of go through and try to answer it systematically. So, all right. So there's already been an issue with this rotation and your program in the past. Right. Okay. Regular reviews of our resident. Well, lots of conversations need to be had. So I'm going to start with bring in your PD. I'm going to also say I think the residence advisor at some point will need to be brought in, but that will be a separate conversation. So let's separate this. As far as the rotation, you or your coordinator or whoever it is that actually contacts the rotation to set up these rotations with the residents should be involved in the conversation. It should be, if that is not you, bring that person in. If it is you, it should be you, the person who evaluates residents on that rotation, and your program director, and you need to do a site visit. I think you need to go to them. You need to go to them, have that conversation with them, find out what the issues have been in the past, let them know that you are open to any kind of communication, fixing the situation, if there's scheduling issues, anything like that. I think you work directly with the rotation to handle all of that stuff. I think a separate conversation needs to be had with the resident that had negative evaluations. I think first things first, you would set up an appointment for them to come in, have a conversation in more of a fact-finding way. So you're going to ask before you tell. You're going to say, received some information regarding your rotation. Just wondering if you could tell me how that went. And let them have that conversation with you, because you're going to understand their perception of what happened during that rotation, and it may give you some pointers as to what your next conversation pieces should be with that resident. If they don't have insight as to the fact that they did anything wrong, that's a completely different conversation that you would need to have. If they do have insight into what they did wrong, I think that's a learning moment that you and your resident can bring to their advisor and your program director to help them to stop that from being an issue in the future. And then there is another conversation that I also feel like needs to happen, and that is between you and the rest of your resident body. I think, our residents, our chief residents have a resident meeting with the rest of the residents once a month. And I have frequently asked for 5 or 10 minutes from that meeting to be able to come in and have conversations with the resident about things that I see are trending as either good or bad in our program, so that I can kind of keep in touch with all of the residents instead of just sending out an email or tacking on a message to the end of the chief email that goes out once a week. And I would have a conversation about how important it is that our rotations want us back to educate us, because we have accreditation to maintain. And we are, in these relationships with these outside providers or even inside providers to give them education and make sure that they can pass boards and become the best doctors they can be. And negative reviews and not wanting to teach our residents is a red flag, saying that maybe our residents don't understand how important it is for them to be there and getting educated by those people. That's my 2 cents. Anybody have comments on that? Stanley, what do you think? Oh, it says it's already been mentioned. At GME level, we're not the only program with issues to meet with their GME staff on working on the relationship. Okay, good. Well, that's part of the problem. So hopefully that helps out. Okay. Anybody else have any scenarios or issues that they're having that they would like to share or maybe vent about? Okay. Well, it's 12:44. I am going to give you some time back in your day. I know how busy we all are right now. Hopefully everybody's new year is going to bring them the best, and hopefully you guys are doing well in your recruitment if you're not already done. And so, I will be posting this on our YouTube page later today, and there will be a QR code for the quiz if you're doing the new coordinator quiz to get the certificate. I will put that up on the YouTube channel with the presentation, so that you guys can go ahead and scan that QR code and take that um, quiz. Give me 1 second. Maybe I can share it right now. Give me 1 second. Oh, I do have it. Let's see. I will share it on my screen. If you guys want to scan it real quick before you hang up, give me 1 second here. There you go. You can go ahead and scan that, and you can answer the questions. And then they'll go to Melissa Keller, and she will be able to put that down for you towards the certificate. Is everybody able to see it? Okay, good. All right. Any other questions before we get off? Thank you so much for coming today. I hope this was helpful for you guys. Bye, Sheila. Bye, Misty. Bye, guys. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye-bye.